My guest today is Diana Graber. She is the digital literacy educator, advocate, and author of Raising Humans in a Digital World, a tool for educators and parents in helping kids build healthy relationships with technology. Her cyber civics program has been adopted by schools in 40 US states and many other countries. She is the founder of the CyberWise website, which is a huge resource for parents on digital literacy. She lives in Southern California. Welcome to the podcast, Diana.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we talked a lot in the pre-chat about just how you built up this cyber civics curriculum and how it's kind of evolved over the last 10 years. So talk to me about a time that you were in the trenches before you had developed the cyber civics curriculum and how you were able to crawl out.
Well, I think maybe a good analogy of that would be when my own kids were in middle school before cyber civics. The school experienced its first digital drama incident, which at the time they thought was cyberbullying.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone kind of freaked out because, again, this was like 2012, I believe was the year. And so we were new to all this stuff, and schools really didn't know how to respond to social media issues that seeped into the school day and then went home, and everyone kind of freaked out and maybe overreacted. And so I was lucky because I had just completed a master's program in media psychology and social change and had studied this stuff in it. And so I approached the administrator of the school and said, hey, can we start teaching kids lessons to help them get ahead of these issues? And I think by doing that, we kind of dug ourselves out of the trenches and kind of got ahead of a lot of these social media issues and things that have happened maybe at other schools.
Mm-hmm. And how did that lead into you just writing the curriculum and getting that off the ground at your particular school?
Well, over the course of 3 years, we developed a 3-year curriculum kind of really with the kids' input and working with a lot of the academics that I had met during my time in school, and really devised a program that was developmentally appropriate, that met kids where they were, and also scaffolded these skills so that they could have a really rich understanding of digital literacy. And then we started getting some awards and really notoriety from other schools that asked us to put it online so they could access it. And so we did, and it just kind of grew from there.
Mm-hmm. And definitely during this time, we're recording this in the summer of 2020, and with the schools shut down in the spring of 2020, how has the quarantine impacted parents at the schools that you've worked with in implementing the cyber civics curriculum? And how do you think, did they have success in monitoring their children's behaviors online? What kind of feedback did you get from those parents?
Well, oddly, we were kind of in a great position for what happened because the way our lessons are delivered, they're really easy, PDFs that can be emailed home to parents to do the lessons at home. And so, I think what happened was kids went home, parents realized, oh my gosh, my kids are going to be on computers way more than we want or expected because they have to be to get their schoolwork and to keep in touch with their friends. And so it became really obvious that lessons in especially digital citizenship are imperative right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were able to have something that met the moment. And so a lot of our schools are now sending the lessons home for parents to do with their children while they're at home.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of feedback are you getting from those parents? Are they easy to do? Is it pretty self-explanatory? Do the parents need to prep a lot, or is it just more of having a conversation with their children?
The biggest thing that we've heard back from the parents is how much they've learned.
Mm-hmm.
Which is really fun for me to hear because the way the lessons are designed, it's sort of like a little introduction, like here's what you need to know. And the parents are like, gosh, I had no idea. And so when they do these things with their kids, they're really learning from each other because the kids will know more about technology and pushing the buttons, and the parents will know about the wisdom that you bring to the technology.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really love it that they're able to have these conversations at home, and they're using the lessons sort of as a guide to have these conversations.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's great that you already had that as a opportunity to do the online curriculum. So there was nothing really that you needed to shift for those courses once everybody shifted to remote learning. You guys were already ready to go, right?
Right. And so we're really ramping up for next year to even make that better because we anticipate that things may not get back to 100% normal yet. So we're going to try to make it even easier for parents to deliver these lessons at home.
Mm-hmm. So I have a middle schooler myself, and during the remote learning period, I experienced him misusing Google Chat to socialize with his peers. And the socialization was beyond academic conversations, right? So he was using the academic platform to have, social conversations, and those conversations were monitored by the district. So he was called out on that. So what type of component of digital literacy skills are lacking for many students that you see, especially at the middle school level? And what is something that maybe you've heard has increased after the move to remote learning?
Yeah. Well, I love that story because it just shows you, I know kids use Google Chat a lot to chat. And it's so funny because I see it not just with my own students, but other kids as they're online. You think they're doing schoolwork and they're actually using it to communicate. And it just underscores that's what kids are developmentally in middle school. They want to connect with their peers. It's their job. It's how they figure out who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so we think we're super crafty when we're checking their text messages, but they're connecting in video games. They're connecting on YouTube, Google Chat, Instagram, Snapchat. I mean, if there's a way to connect, they will find it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that really takes it back to the parents. Like, we can't focus on the tools. We have to focus on the behaviors the kids take to the tools. And so one of the things we work on in the level 1 of cyber civics is like, everything you do online stays online forever, and someone's going to find out about it no matter where it is. So you have to really be careful what you say online, and don't do anything online that you wouldn't do in person. And, try to have face-to-face communication as much as possible. So all that stuff is embedded in the program, and it's not taught in one lesson. It's taught over the course of several lessons. So we keep reminding kids about the ubiquity of digital life, and how these conversations that we think is just between us and one other person can actually go out to lots of other people.
Mm-hmm. And that's a foundation of just for them learning online etiquette, correct?
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up too, because that was a lesson that we added to the curriculum this year, is video conferencing etiquette.
Mm-hmm.
So all these kids, all of a sudden, they're doing their lessons online, and we haven't really taught them, how do you do that? Like, how do you act when you're in a video conference? And there's certain etiquette check boxes that you want to go through. And so we do that now in the curriculum as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you could just see there's, sometimes kids that are sneaking things into the chat, and they think they're talking to one student, and everybody can see it. So, like, there's a lot of kids that it's setting those expectations, right?
Right. I mean, a great example is when I did my first Zoom with 7th graders, and they came with like silly backdrops or just inappropriate clothing or whatever. And I'm like, okay, how easy would it be to take a screenshot of this and post it on Instagram? And they're like, oh, I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
So they're
So,
always learning.
could you tell us a little bit from your book about the 4 components of digital literacy that both parents and educators should use as guidelines with their children and their students?
Right. Well, that's in my book. I compare raising a digital child today to building a house. That
Mm-hmm.
it's not an overnight project. It takes a lot of work. There's a lot of parts to it. And as you build a house, you want to think of your 4 sturdy pillars to hold it up. And I think in digital life, if we think of the 4 most important topics, it would be screen time, which is what parents tell me they're always worried about. Your digital reputation, what we just talked about, privacy, maintaining some sort of privacy online, and your relationships. And that covers all the social media networks that you belong to, that allow you to establish relationships with others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I really like the part where you're talking about the privacy part and the third parties. I've been in a book club in my district for the past month or so. It's a chapter a week. And, the questions just for the adults, they're asking us, do we think a lot about when we agree to those third party applications?
Right.
And
Yeah.
I remember this week I was answering, sometimes there's those things on Facebook, like those avatars recently, where you'll see all your Facebook friends will pop up with an avatar, and then I realized, well, I'm not going to do that because I know there's a third party involved, and they're trying to collect information from me.
It makes me I think it's so funny, all these quizzes that you get. I mean, they're enticing for sure. And I've often like that, oh, I want to do that quiz and find out. And then we have to remind ourselves, nothing online is free. Like, it's a fun quiz wants something from you in return.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're giving away that information that Lord knows where it's going.
Mm-hmm. Correct. So, I think those, whether they're targeting it towards adults or children, there's there's always that factor where they want to try to entice people, right?
Right.
And it's having that self-control and knowing, well,
Yeah.
thinking twice about whether
Yeah.
we really want to expose, our information to.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember I was teaching a unit on that, the time the Cambridge Analytica scandal broke on Facebook, and
Mhm.
I came in and told the seventh grade class about it, and they said, "I can't believe adults are that dumb." It was adults didn't have these lessons when they were in middle school. That's why it happens.
Yes. So something that really stood out to me in the book, it's on page 156. It's CRAP acronym. So it's about detecting crap online, and
Yeah.
it's an important component about what kids should know
Yes.
when using the web for news research and finally finding reliable sources. So how can this activity be an eye opener for parents as well?
Well, it's such a great acronym to it's easy to remember, number one, but it really is a great tool if you detect misinformation online. So CRAP stands for if you see something online and you think that doesn't seem right, you ask yourself how current is the information,
Mhm.
how reliable or reputable is the source, who is the author, is it someone that you know, and what's the purpose or point of view of that article.
Mhm.
So you can really use that if you see a website that you think is funny or a news article that you don't think is quite right. And it really helps to dig deeper. I use it myself. I used it just yesterday,
Mhm.
and it works every time.
Hmm. Yeah, and I like the examples that you give about you had your students do an activity after fake news became such a phenomenon, and they were looking at articles and determining if those really were real news or fake news articles. And I think that's something we should have, more adults and kids just realize, is this using that crap factor that you discussed?
Right. And there's a second part of that too. When you detect something online that's crap, you need to call it out. And all of the social media networks right now have really great mechanisms for doing that. I did it just yesterday. I saw something on my Facebook feed that someone posted, and it was an article that said that AOC and Alexandria Cortez, whatever her name is, that she had posted this tweet. And I read it and I said, that just does not sound right to me.
Mhm.
And so I investigated it. I used the crap test. I thought if it was current. Thought of who was reliable. I looked up the author, thinking if they had a point of view. I used all the things and I determined it was not true.
Mhm.
And so I responded very kindly to the person who posted it, say, look, this isn't true. And then I marked it as false news with the Facebook mechanism. Within 20 minutes, Facebook had blocked it and said, this is false information. And
Mhm.
so I felt like, gosh, that's pretty good. I used the crap test and look at what happened. It helped other people realize that this was misinformation online.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's great that they're able to get that off that quickly, and
I was shocked, honestly. Yeah.
yeah, have that stop circulating. So there's
Right.
an eye opener for those who like to read the book. There's an eye opener of how the fake news came about and how people were paid to write that. So I'll let
Yes.
people read the book and figure
Yeah.
out how
Yeah.
how that kind of came about. But we talked a lot in the pre-chat about just kind of how the cyber civics curriculum has changed and developed since you began teaching it about 10 years ago, because in the early 2010s, we really only had MySpace, and Facebook had just come about in 2008, and not many teenagers were on social media when you first started teaching cyber civics. So how has it changed, and maybe how have students embraced it with the different changes in the digital landscape?
Yeah. Well, it's funny that I learned about how much it changed when I did the book. I had someone interview all of the students I taught the very first year that we had cyber civics. And I thought it was so cute because one of the boys, he's now 22 years old, said, when she taught us this stuff, she said, someday someone's going to look at your digital reputation. And I thought, what is this lady talking about? Because back then there was no Instagram or anything else.
Mhm.
And this young man had just applied for 2 jobs. And at both jobs, the person interviewing him asked him to pull out his phone and scroll through his Instagram account because the person wanted to see if there was anything inappropriate there.
Mhm.
And he said he thought to himself, like, this is what she was talking about, you know. And I thought that was great because back then we had no idea that there would be an Instagram and that would ever happen. But that's how technology has changed. It's so easy now for people to look at our different feeds to find out what kind of person we are.
Mhm. Mhm. And do you think the students that you've taught in the schools that you've worked with, kids are becoming more and more vigilant about what they post on social media and what people can find out about them when they Google that person?
Well, I think definitely the kids who go through cyber civics do, because it's reinforced with them every week throughout the entirety of middle school. That's very powerful. You know, kids who get like a one-time lecture on this stuff are for sure going to make mistakes, because that's not how kids learn. And so we revisit these topics from left, from right, from upside down, in so many different ways that it really gets embedded into their behaviors, which is super important. More importantly than that is when kids learn these lessons together, they're watching out for each other. And I've seen that happen again and again, where a child will post something that's kind of dumb, and then one of his friends will say, you know what, maybe you shouldn't post that, and they'll take it down. So, not only are the kids learning for themselves, but they're learning to watch out for their buddies. And I think that's super important.
Yeah, I think that's something the kids need to keep in mind is just, watch out for other students who might, not be thinking when they post something. And,
Right.
sometimes you're able to take things down, sometimes not. Sometimes it's lost in the cyber universe. So,
Exactly.
think twice before you actually
Right.
do it. So,
Right.
you end your book with a twist on the title. Since the title is Raising Humans in the Digital World, you talk about being human in the digital age. So,
Yeah.
how have students that you've taught in cyber civics learn to effectively take breaks from screen time? Because we want to make sure that we're having that time away from all the distractions of screen time.
Right, right. Well, I think some of our most powerful lessons are the ones about technology use, and we do that pretty deeply in both the second and third level.
Mhm.
In the second level, we have the kids analyze their digital diet and then take a screen media vacation where they try 24 hours without media.
Mhm.
And that sounds so silly, but honestly, for the kids, it's super powerful, because for a seventh grader today, none of them know life before technology. And it's a rare child who has taken a 24-hour break from technology. So to make them do it as homework is, number one, very difficult. Number two, oftentimes it really opens their eyes. And a lot of them come back and say, God, I felt so relaxed. I wasn't stressed out, and I did things I have never done before. And so that's kind of where you start opening the door.
Mhm.
We do that again in eighth grade by taking a look. There's a couple lessons on what technology does to our brains and what's built into technology to keep us hooked. That's a great lesson to do with kids of this age, because kids do not like being duped,
Mhm.
especially a teenager. And when they realize that the person doing the duping is actually their phone, it often makes them mad. They don't want to
Mhm.
use it as much. So I love doing those lessons at this age, because you're helping kids determine for themselves that maybe technology isn't all it's cracked up to be, and that maybe there's times we should put it down and do other things. And so I want kids to come to those conclusions on their own.
Mhm.
And I think, slowly, it's like leading a horse to water. Slowly we get there.
Yeah, and it's so easy for us to say because when we grew up, we didn't have technology, right?
Right.
And it's hard for us to put ourselves in their shoes and think about, it's always been around. And when you were talking, I remember how at the beginning of the book you talk about how uh, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends no kids under 2 should be using technology or watching TV. And I was trying to be very vigilant with that when my kids were under 2. And like you see parents out with their toddlers on iPads a lot in the restaurants. So the younger you get them started on technology, I think the more addicted they'll be. Or you know.
Right. And especially now, I mean, I really feel for families who have kids at home and they're trying to do their own work. I mean, it's really hard
Mhm.
to manage that time, but that's why I think it's really important to help kids learn how to manage it for themselves.
Yeah, and as a parent, I try to keep a time on how long they're going to be on their iPad or how long my 4-year-old's going to watch TV. And I tell my other kids, when they were staying at home a lot during remote learning, I was like, you have to read, you have to do this, and they were on technology obviously a lot longer than I would like them to be because the school was on the computer. But I try to make sure they're being active and getting outside as well. So.
That's so important.
So, out of this conversation, what's the most important thing that you would like listeners to remember?
Well, I'm so glad that you brought it up, because I think it really is important to remember that we want to be humans in a digital world. And I think sometimes we forget that. And all of those human qualities that are so important, like empathy and understanding others and kindness and all that, those are really developed offline, especially with children. Those are skills that you develop when a child's an infant, and they start understanding how to read facial expressions or social cues. And the more time that we can give a child to develop those super important social emotional skills, the better human they'll be online and offline. And so I love to go back to those real basics and just remind everybody that, humans haven't changed. Our tools will change and they will continue to change, but humans haven't changed. And there's certain things humans need. We need that social connection with others, and that's best developed in a young child offline. So really want to go back to that.
Mm-hmm. I think that's great to end with, and just reminding everybody of how important it is for face-to-face contact, or if you're unable during COVID, just FaceTime counts, but just being able to have that conversation and not using text, right, or email, just having that face-to-face conversation.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, think how nice. I mean, I don't know about you, but I get tired of looking at screens all day, and
mhm.
to be able to pick up a phone and hear a human voice is like a treat. So,
Yeah, that's right. And during the whole pandemic, I've been volunteering a little bit at the food bank, and it's good for me to just get out and be among other people. And we stock shelves and we do our own thing. But you're in a setting where you're seeing people, you're social distancing. But
we're social animals. We need it. It's who we are. So, and I think we're all reminding ourselves of that during this horrible time.
well, I thank you so much for being on the podcast. If listeners want to find you, where can they find you online?
Well, for my book, I'm at dianagraber.com. The curriculum is at cybercivics.com. And then our website for parents is cyberwise.org.
Okay. Thanks so much. And I will include those in the show notes. Um, really enjoyed the conversation today. Thanks for being on the Out of the Trenches podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.